New details today about the supply shortages on board the USS Lincoln and the lack of planning from Pete Hegseth's Pentagon ahead of President Trump's war of choice with Iran. For weeks, we've been reporting on the grim conditions on board as the war grinds on without any clear endgame, concerns about wear and tear from 6 months of constant combat, potentially putting service members at risk. A mental health crisis with reports of crew attempting to jump overboard. Broken showers and toilets, rationing of food, shortages of basic essentials like soap or toothpaste. One retired Navy commander told MS Now, "We didn't plan for this war. We just sort of did it on the fly. And when you fight a war as a pickup game, this is the kind of stuff that happens." Let's bring in MS Now's Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar. She has that brand new reporting today. Priya, tell us, what are the details here?
Hey, Alicia, I think this is such an important question, especially because so many of the officials in this administration have tried to deny that there were any supply shortages on this ship or deteriorating conditions. But essentially what we're learning is that Navy leaders are saying that when Bahrain got hit by Iranian missiles at the beginning of this war, that essentially caused a ripple effect. We saw thousands of non-essential personnel from that base get evacuated. And this is really Fifth Fleet's logistical headquarters. This is where Navy ships in the region would go to get resupplied. But of course, with the Lincoln, they haven't had a port call in 208 continuous days. And now supply ships weren't able to go to that base. So they had to look for an alternative option. In the past, the Navy has used ports in Kuwait or the United Arab Emirates, but those had similar problems where they were within striking distance of Iranian missiles. So then the Navy could have looked at trying to get supplies through the Mediterranean, but that would have involved the Red Sea. And they had the same concerns there because the Houthis were threatening to attack commercial vessels in the Red Sea. So they had to pivot to Diego Garcia, which is a tiny island in the Indian Ocean, 2,200 miles away from the Gulf of Oman, which is where these aircraft carriers were sitting. So instead of being able to resupply these ships every 3 days like they would have been able to do if they went to Bahrain, they weren't able to resupply the ships except in 10-day cycles. And Diego Garcia is simply just not big enough. It doesn't have the capacity to hold the amount of supplies that you would need for 2 carrier strike groups. So as you said in the very beginning, Alicia, at the heart of the matter here is Navy leaders are saying that simply the administration thought this was going to be a few weeks long war, and it's turned into now we're going into month 6. And that's really what has caused all of this to have a trickle down effect on the service members not being able to get food and basic hygiene supplies.
I want to play for you, Priya, some of what Congressman Greg Casar said about this situation. Take a listen.
On the USS Lincoln, we had our soldiers, our service members in deplorable conditions. Their parents, including their parents in my own district in Central Texas, were speaking out about this. And Donald Trump said, I wish the deployment could go longer. It should just go longer. We had Donald Trump lie and say we weren't going to get into forever wars. Then you've got Pete Hegseth saying we could be in the Strait of Hormuz, quote unquote, indefinitely. Those were his words.
Priya, what are you hearing from those military families now?
I think that, Alicia, there's a lack of trust between these service members' families and the administration because, like I said before, at the very beginning, they were told that this was going to be just a few weeks long mission. They were going to be able to come home potentially in May. And then they saw their deployment extended and extended. And then to make matters worse, essentially, we're hearing that the president is calling these service members and their families liars. And I think that these are some of the most patriotic people in our country. They've chosen to wear a uniform to defend our freedoms. And so to call them liars, I think it's really a slap in the face. And if, I had one family member say that she essentially feels like she's being gaslit, like their concerns are being minimized here. And so what they are really trying to focus on right now is the positive news in all of this, which is that the Lincoln is on its way home to San Diego finally. And they truly believe that none of that would have happened had they not all spoken out about this in the first place.
President Trump's war of choice with Iran and Pete Hegseth's dysfunctional Pentagon leadership are raising new concerns about the safety of U.S. service members. Former Navy commanders tell MS Now they worry about the high levels of wear and tear on American aircraft carriers, some of which have broken modern-day records for deployment length. They point to the catapults that launch fighter jets and the gear that catches them when they land on the floating runways, all of which have been used extensively over nearly 6 months of fast-paced and unplanned warfare. One retired Navy captain saying, quote, "We are excessively wearing out our ships. The longer that you're working them hard at sea, the more the Navy needs to invest time into maintenance. The Navy did not respond to MS Now's request for comment about delayed maintenance on those ships. I'm going to bring in MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, who broke that story. Ned Price, Mitch Landrieu are still with us. Priya, you've reported on problems with the USS Lincoln, but experts say this kind of maintenance debt has a domino effect. What are they telling you?
Yeah, that's right, Alicia. Well, typically when an aircraft carrier comes back to the United States, it goes into the docks for a maintenance period, which is usually around 7 to 8 months. But because we've seen so many aircraft carriers double the length of their deployments from what's usually about 6 to 7 months to as long as 12 months, it makes sense then that maintenance period then can get extended to a year or a year and a half. And in addition to that, specifically with the Lincoln, we saw it go at sea for 208 continuous days without a port call, which meant that when an aircraft carrier pulls into port, it allows mechanics and engineers and contractors to come on the ship and address different maintenance issues that could come up. So all of that combined together is creating a potential for extreme danger and safety issues, because when you're talking about those catapults and those arresting gears, I mean, if something were to go wrong there, it could lead potentially to a deadly accident, Alicia.
You know, Mitch Landrieu, Priya and I were on earlier this week. We were talking with Amy McGrath, and she reminded us this is not about the members of the armed services needing to be cuddled. It is not specifically about a ship itself. It is about clear leadership from both the commander-in-chief and the person who leads DOD. I want you to take a listen to what Senator Mark Kelly said about the president's leadership.
He took our country to war without a strategic goal, without a plan. Now he has no way out of this, and he's stuck. And this has been bungled right from the beginning. And he's got a Secretary of Defense who has no idea what he's doing. I think the most incompetent Secretary of Defense that we've ever had in our history. And the American people are suffering because of this. We also have 18 dead Americans, for no reason.
Mitch, how would you describe the leadership that is coming from the White House and from the Pentagon right now?
Well, again, as Pete Hegseth's words would use, war fighters actually know how to prosecute a war. And obviously, this is just a complete disaster. First of all, the president promised people that he was going to end the war in Ukraine on day one and stay out of foreign wars. Instead, the war in Ukraine is just blowing and going. And of course, he started this war of choice, and he did it in a way that was not planned well. He picked Pete Hegseth, who was incompetent, to be the head of this war effort. And what did Pete Hegseth do the other day? Was he doing something to fix this particular problem? No, he was campaigning as Secretary of Defense. We haven't seen this in our lifetime. He was campaigning in Iowa rather than taking care of his quote unquote war fighters. So again, this is an indication that the president has lost focus, that his leadership, it can't be called that, is just high incompetence. And they have basically bungled what was a war of choice, and they didn't even prosecute well because they didn't plan well for it. It all goes back to the president. So if a president's reckless, if he cares more about ballrooms and bombs, if he can't even prosecute a war and he's not taking care of the American people, what the hell is he doing? So it is a mell of a hess, as we like to say down here on the bayou.
Part of what has become so notable is the fact that you have family of sailors, of Marines aboard the Lincoln who've been increasingly voicing their concerns to the press and the Pentagon. I want to play for all of you some of what the family of one sailor told the New York Times. It starts with her mom and then her husband.
I keep hearing, well, they signed up for this. They didn't sign up to be on a ship in the middle of the ocean with no port calls, no feet on the ground. That wasn't in the brochure when they signed up.
She's been struggling. I think the only thing that helps her is when she gets videos from me of the boys. That brings her spirits up.
To infinity and beyond. Mama loves you, Gunny.
She recorded this for the boys while she's on deployment because she misses them so much. I haven't gotten as much sleep because I have been nervous about her. And I'm also nervous about the boys because I don't have my partner here to help me with them.
These conditions, what do they mean for morale? What do they mean for recruitment? And then in some, what do they mean for our national security?
Well, look, there's a cost, there's a toll that's incurred by these warships, and we've seen some of the conditions aboard them. But yes, we have to be most concerned with the mental health, with the physical, with the safety concerns that our men and women in uniform face every single day. These are people who signed up for sacrifice. They're no stranger to sacrifice. But these are individuals who, by and large, want to know that their sacrifice are being made in service of the United States, of our national security, of our foreign policy, of the safety, security, well-being, health, and prosperity of every single American. And it's really hard, if not impossible, to make that case right now, which I think is also sapping morale. Look, one can argue if there was ever any strategy associated with this misadventure in Iran. I would make that case. I don't think there was ever a real strategy tethered to it. But if there ever was one, we've moved past the strategy phase now, and now we're at the phase of throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. And just last night, to the point of what we're asking our sailors, airmen, and Marines to fight for, President Trump said it's now about economic pressure, maximum economic pressure. Okay, well, you know what his strategy in his first term against Iran was called? Maximum pressure. We have tried this before. It did not work the first time. If it's going to work this time, there are two problems standing in the way. One is the UAE, and the other is China. This president, I don't think, will be willing to ask the UAE, that has provided sweetheart deals to him, to his family, to his friends, to make the kind of economic sacrifices they'll have to do. And with President Xi of China coming to the United States on September 24th, a relationship the president wants to keep at equilibrium for the American economy and in turn for his poll numbers, most importantly, I don't think he wants to upset that either. So it goes back to the question of what's our strategy? How are we going to pull our service members out of this with anything in return?
And who has input into that strategy? Pete Hegseth's wife, Jennifer Hegseth, is attracting attention for her unusually active role in the Pentagon. You have the New York Times reporting she is his most influential advisor and his de facto producer at the Pentagon. She has prepped him for appearances, sat in on his meetings with journalists, interviewed potential members of his staff, and brainstormed ideas for the Defense Department videos he and sometimes she appears in. She also sits in highly sensitive intelligence meetings. That's according to reports, which has made allies incredibly uncomfortable. I wonder, Priya, what you were hearing from inside the Pentagon.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is incredibly hypocritical because Secretary of Defense Hegseth kicked out most of the press corps because he was saying that we were wandering around the halls trying to get access to classified information. Yet you're seeing his wife be privy to very sensitive information when it comes to military operations. So I think his logic just doesn't apply when it's not convenient for him. And I think that is what's most upsetting to most people, journalists, I should say, that work inside of the Pentagon specifically, is that if we're not allowed to go inside because we're supposedly trying to solicit classified information from people, then why is someone who doesn't have a national security background, doesn't have a security clearance, sitting in on these extremely important meetings?
Mitch, I mean, it happens at the same time that the longtime publisher of the military newspaper Stars and Stripes is retiring due to clashes with the Pentagon over coverage. In a memo seen by the Associated Press, Max Lederer Jr. wrote that it had, quote, become clear that my philosophy of leadership and my understanding of the value and mission of Stars and Stripes differ in fundamental ways from the direction of the leadership of the Department of Defense has for the organization. What does that tell you, Mitch Landrieu, about what is happening at the Pentagon?
Well, again, he's basically destroying the Pentagon and its top leadership. If you put the pictures up of all of the warfighters that he has fired for some strange reason, which have had, I mean, years and years and years of incredible experience, and now he's relying on people who just happen to be personally close to him to give him information about how to fight a war that he wasn't prepared to fight. I mean, it's just, it should make everybody in America weep. I mean, it's one of the reasons why they basically drove the car off into a ditch and they don't know what to do. He doesn't have the most competent people around him. All the while he's complaining about DEI. He's not running an organization based on merit. But again, it all goes back to the president. The president of the United States put Pete Hegseth there. The president of the United States has given him the run. The president of the United States allowed him to go to Iowa. So the fish rots from the head. The buck stops at Donald Trump's office. He is too busy on the helipad and the ballrooms to focus on what really matters to the security of the American people. And he's lost focus about reducing people's costs, which is the reason they said they elected him. And they're pissed. And I think they're going to deliver a blow to him in 76 days or so.
And why he keeps claiming that magically oil prices are going to be the lowest you have ever seen. You just keep waiting. Mitch Landrieu, Priya Sridhar, Ned Price, thank you all so much for getting us started.
Let's bring in Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, a member of the Armed Services Committee. He's also challenging Senator Ed Markey for the U.S. Senate seat in their state's primary. Congressman Moulton, thank you for joining us here on State of Play.
Good to see you, Peter.
So I understand, of course, you are against this war, but we are now almost 6 months into it. So what is the solution to end it?
I mean, first of all, let's just be clear. The administration has no clue how to get out of the mess that they've started. This is what I would do. I would say, first, you've got to stop the violence immediately. And that takes initiative from us, not just from the Iranians. Every time we hear Trump up there saying, oh, well, the Iranians are begging for peace, the reality is he's begging for peace. He's got to make it happen. The second thing is you need to take leverage away from the Iranians over the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, they're strangling the world economy because they can control oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump has proven that he's not going to solve that problem militarily. If he wants to get a good negotiation, then he's got to take leverage away, so ship the oil north. And then third, we've got to get back to actually empowering the moderates in the Iranian regime. See, there's this alternate history we never talk about, which is that if we had just pursued the Obama nuclear deal, kept it in place, and even if Trump had come into office and said, you know what, it's a terrible deal, but I'm going to build on top of it, rather than tearing it up, then every time we make a deal like that with the Iranian government, it empowers the moderates in Iran, the people who actually are closer to the Iranian people, the pro-American folks there, and that's how ultimately you end this problem for good.
Let me ask you specifically about the USS Abraham Lincoln. You heard MS Now's reporting from my colleagues Priya Sridhar and Lindsey Pipia about the supply shortages, the requirement ultimately that supplies be shipped in from the Indian Ocean instead of from the base that was targeted and hit during this war in Bahrain right now. You're on the Armed Services Committee. How will you hold this administration accountable?
I mean, watch how I've held Pete Hegseth accountable every time he's come before my committee. It is absolutely critical that we don't let these guys off the hook. I mean, Hegseth should be fired immediately, but even if he is fired, he needs to be hauled back in before Congress to answer what the hell has gone on with this war. Who started it? You know, how did we get into this mess? How did you not figure out just basic stuff like the fact that Iran would probably close the Strait of Hormuz if you tried this kind of military adventurism? And then look at how they just utterly have no plan to deal with the consequences. I mean, it's actually made our national security much worse in that part of the world. That's why the Abraham Lincoln couldn't pull into a port that previously was safe for American troops.
Yeah, Senator, let me ask you if I can about the campaign that you're in the midst of. Of course, the early vote now begins this weekend, starts, I think, tomorrow, right? Starts on Saturday. This is to be the next senator of Massachusetts. You're up against Ed Markey, as we noted here. You framed this race around generational change and around Markey's sort of progressive bona fides. But he has the endorsements of popular progressives, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. Why are they wrong?
Well, look, what we saw in the debate just last night when we were asked a question about AI is Ed Markey explaining to Massachusetts how he does not understand the difference between Siri and Claude. He doesn't understand the difference between different apps on his phone or his iPad. And then he later tried to clean up that by comparing AI to the automobile and saying we need to regulate AI the way we regulate seatbelts. It's just a different world, Peter. I mean, this is not the same as 2020 when all those same people endorsed his campaign. In fact, the Boston Globe, in endorsing me, switching from Ed Markey, who they endorsed in the last time around, to endorsing me, said, look, the future is now. It's a different world. In 2020, we didn't even have AI. So having senators who understood it didn't really matter. But now it's a real problem when AI is threatening to take jobs, threatening to take basic privacy away from people all across America, and yet also represents tremendous promise. We need senators who actually get it, who can actually be effective at regulating it, to make it safe the way we've failed to regulate the internet. It's a different world.
Yeah, to be very clear, Markey, as you know, has been in office for decades. This is the generational point you've tried to make. You have obviously served yourself for more than a decade. Doesn't that make you a part of the establishment, sir?
I mean, look, if I were running against someone who'd never been in Washington, you could make that argument. But I'm running against someone who's been in Washington for 50 years. He's been elected longer than I've even been alive, Peter. And he's 80, which means that at the end of his next term, if he were to get reelected, he would be closer to 90 than to 80. I think it's time for the generation that grew up with the internet and is going to have to live with decades for AI to make the decisions about our future.
One quick question. If Democrats win the Senate, will you support Chuck Schumer as the next majority leader?
Absolutely not. And that's another big difference between myself and Ed Markey.